Hello, and welcome to The Prodigal Life. I'm Deacon Harold, and I'm joined, as usual, by Nick and Ellen. And we are here to help you make a deeper, more richer, more intimate connection between your faith and your everyday lived experience.
Indeed we are. And today we have a very special guest. I know that I say that all the time. The guest we have is special. Well, you know what? It is always true. But today we have an especially special guest. How's that sound? You might recognize her if you're watching the show. If you're listening, then you'll have to wait till she speaks, and then you might recognize her voice. She is someone who does a lot of work in the media for the kingdom. And we're going to have some pretty amazing, intense conversations, even just the pregame conversations we had before hitting the record button. We were covering some great ground on a lot of cool topics. So, Ellen, would you like to please introduce our guest and topic?
It would be my honor to. So we are thrilled to have Sue Brinkmann with us. She's affiliated with Women of Grace. She lectures around the world on the New Age lie, and she also is very much involved in contemplative prayer and other things. So we are very, very blessed to have you with us, and we look forward to hearing your testimony, and we're just going to let you take it away and tell us about yourself, Susan.
Well, thank you so much, first of all, for having me. It's the first time on this show. I've heard a lot of good things about it. So you guys are doing a great job. And I hope I don't mess it up for you, okay? So I'm going to try to do my best. I'll do my best. Yeah, well, my conversion story, the Lord has a sense of humor. That should really be the bottom line for it. He has a sense of humor. I was, back, this is maybe 30 years ago now. I came of age in the early 70s. I was part of the Feminist revolution. And I was a career girl, divorcee, good job, company car, expense account, nice wardrobe. No love. No love. My husband left me. It was one of those work him through law school and then he doesn't, it was one of those stories. So anyway, I was just like thousands of other young women in those days. I was, caught up in that hookup culture, friends with benefits. But deep down inside, all I really wanted to do was just like all the other women. I wanted to just find a nice man and settle down and have a family. That's just, even though I was a feminist and I was a real feminist. The feminists of today, we would have had them for lunch. We were very angry women. We were angry, just mad. And all this woke stuff, of today is so powder puffery. It would be like, you go ahead, offend me, see what I care. That's the way we would have been back in those days. So we were really tough. And I was a tough one, and I was angry because of my experiences. I was angry too. But I had a great love in my life, and that love was writing. I loved to write. It was fiction now. And I wanted to be a writer more than anything in the world. And every weekend I would spend working on my latest novel. And I was sure that each book was the big one. This is it. I'm going to be $1 million bestseller. Here it comes, But that wasn't happening. I couldn't even get a letter published in the local newspaper. It just wasn't working. I worked on that for about 14 years. I did manage to get an agent, but I just couldn't get anything sold. But that's what I did. And I think that's why I never turned to alcohol or drugs or anything during that very difficult time after divorce, because I was so engrossed in this writing, and that's what I would do. And that just consumed me.
It was like your drug.
That was my
Writing
drug.
was your drug.
Well said. That's exactly what it was. But then I started, I was looking for some answers. How come I'm never getting published? How come this is not working? So I started to turn to the New Age. And I went to psychics, to astrologers. I had my natal chart done. I went to a psychic who told me everything I wanted to hear. That you're going to be married to a man with a different ethnic background. You're going to have 3 children. She told everything you want to hear. She also paired me up with her nephew. She showed me a picture of him. He was so handsome, just my type. We talked on the phone for 2 hours. I thought, oh, this is great. And then he showed up at my house and he was like 200 pounds heavier than he was in the picture. And it ended up being just another date from hell. I actually wrote about all this, and I wrote a book about it called We Need to Talk, God Speaks to a Modern Girl. And I have all of the dates from hell in there, and they all were. But I won't get into that now. We don't have time for all those. But then one day I fell into the prosperity gospel, and this is what started the wheels turning. And this is now we're into the early 90s when this was happening. And I read in the prosperity gospel, that's how Jesus just wants you to have all kinds of money, riches, and happiness. There's no cross in the prosperity gospel. And it said in there, ask and you shall receive. And that the reason we don't get everything we want is because we don't ask, or we don't ask right. So one night I decided, I'm going to go ahead and ask. But I want to see, did he really say that? Is that what he said? Now, and I think this was the pivotal moment of grace for me. Now, when I look back on it, I see that that's what it was. I put down that book and I went in search of a Bible. Now, this is how far away I was from my faith at the time. I didn't even know I had one, but I did. I found a Bible. And not because I had it around to read, I must admit. I bought it because it was an antique. And I was into antiques at the time. So that's why I had that Bible in the house. Thank God I had that Bible in the house. And as it turns out, Jesus really did say that. And while I was rooting through the book, I stumbled across the Psalms and David talking to this God. And he was saying, you are my defender. You are my strength. You are my helper. You are my hiding place. A torn up, wounded woman like me, I remember thinking to myself, I could really use somebody like this in my life. Who is this God? Who is he? And here I had all these years of Catholic schooling. Who is this God? Now, in spite of the culture, who I was inextricably drawn to this God, and I would refer to him as David's God. So when I first started out, that's who he was to me. And I would read the Psalms at night. I never told any of my friends because they would have thought I fell out of a tree and hit my head. But no way would I admit that to them. But I would read the Psalms at night because whoever this God was, I kind of liked him, I needed help. I was very vulnerable to both my dream of being a writer. I still was trying to find a good husband. So I had what I call chinks in my feminist armor. They were my chinks, little cracks. And I always tell people, if you've got folks in your family who aren't going to church, they all have a chink somewhere. And that's where the grace comes in. The grace comes in through those chinks. And that was mine. We take grace for granted, but it's very, very powerful. And grace is what operated on me that night when I went to look for that Bible. I never had any idea that my life was about to change forever because of me looking at those Psalms. And I started to pray. Go ahead.
Can we rewind just a minute?
Sure.
So you were talking about, I want to clarify because I want to make sure I understood this correctly as well as for the viewers and listeners. You said that you became a feminist because it was like a reaction from your wounds from what your husband did when he left you. Is that?
Yeah, but that was pretty much
correct?
The culture of the day. Now, this is back in the 70s. I was still in high school, early college, getting married, for the first time. That was really the rage, was the feminism. But the anger really had me, after the divorce, and that really had me embracing feminism very deeply at that point.
That's amazing. And what's so beautiful to me about that is, obviously it's not beautiful that you were hurt, but what I mean is connecting that then to where you just left off on your story, the way that God reached you. And you were reading this God of David. You're reading about this God of David, and you just used this phrase, I think, which was like, "I want a man like that," or "I want a God like that," or something like that. And it's amazing how God reaches people in all sorts of ways. He could have reached you in any number of ways. It's not like you don't have other opportunities of access to the good news, but he chose to reach you specifically, acutely in the area of your wounds, which is one of being betrayed, one of not being treasured by a man, one of not being taken care of, and all the different attributes of God that stood out to you in that moment was really a response to him revealing that he is the healing of those areas in which you are wounded.
Absolutely. And also, I was very much against the Catholic Church at the time.
Were you a cradle Catholic?
I was a cradle. Yes, okay. I was a cradle Catholic, but I left it. And at this point in my life, I would say I was away for about at least 15 years at this point when this was all happening to me. And I was, like I said, one of those feminists, hardcore at that point. And I'm just remembering back to that time, the book, The Dialectic of Sex by the very radical feminist Shulamith Firestone. And she believed that Karl Marx didn't go far enough. She believed the family had to be attacked directly, not just refashioned. And she wanted to eliminate, the whole idea of male privilege, but also of all sex distinctions. She was kind of ahead of her time, really, because that's really coming about now. She wanted women absolute control of their reproduction, including abortion on demand. She wanted total sexual liberation. It didn't matter what age, gender, number, marital status. She was very radical. And she believed, like all radical feminists did, that the greatest enemy of their agenda was the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church categorically opposed every item on that agenda: the abortion, the contraception, the reproductive technologies, all that stuff. Yeah. Now, I wasn't quite that radical.
Because they promoted authentic femininity, which is the Catholic ideal. So
and I was going to learn that. He was going to teach me that. But that's not quite yet. But that's where I was at the moment. And I had that chink in my armor. And I had met David's God by now. And David's God, I didn't realize, but he had come in through the chink at this point. He was in there. I was reading it regularly, the Psalms.
So how are you balancing the scriptures and the New Age? Because to me, it just seems to be
it didn't they fit together very well for me. That's a very good question, Deacon Sivers, because you know what? A lot of people do that. They dabble in both.
Wow.
I did.
It's just okay, this is the spiritual realm.
I would never think to go to New Age.
No, I mean, that's exactly what my experience was. When I was attending the Unitarian Universalist Church. They considered themselves Christians, even though their bookstore had a selection from literally every world religion. And the invitation was, hey, this is a buffet, create your own truth. They still would call themselves Christian.
Exactly.
Their sacred text, there was a Bible that sat on their podium every Sunday.
But it was never opened.
Never once opened. Their sacred text was the secret, the law of attraction. That was their sacred text.
Yeah. The law of attraction still is. It still is their sacred text.
So how did you, I guess, because as someone who's never dabbled in New Age, you guys have, but I haven't. Yeah. So I'm thinking, because I was a Benedictine, so I loved, and I pray the Psalms. I've been praying the Psalms for over 40 years. And I studied the Psalms. So I know about the divisions in the Psalms and which ones David wrote and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just baffled, I guess, but the way I've engaged the Psalms and over my lifetime have drawn different experiences, how the Psalms have spoken to me in different ways at different points in my life. For example, I think of the Psalms differently now in my 50s than I did in my 20s or my 30s, So I'm thinking, but how did you balance that with New Age? I'm just trying to,
no, here it is. Here it is, Deacon Sivers. I was getting spiritual. I'm just being spiritual. I'm not religious. I'm spiritual.
Not religious. She's spiritual.
So when you're spiritual, you can dabble in everything.
Okay.
This is another one of Satan's little, tricks there.
That's like the invitation at the bookstore that I just mentioned at the Unitarian church I was attending. It's like literally they offer you literally all of the options and say, invent your own stuff. You can use any ingredients you want.
Wow.
Exactly. Just mix and match it. They're doing that. That's a big thing with millennial age kids right now. They just mix and match everything and put it together, and then whatever they're comfortable with, and they just do it. They're really
I don't think they see it any differently than going and ordering fast food. Do you want fries? Do you want tater tots? Do you want cucumber? Do you want, what do you want? Okay, well, I'm going to make my own.
That's it. That's exactly what they're doing.
Chipotle.
It's like Chipotle, make your own.
I wonder if they charge extra for the guac.
Yeah.
So there's really no objective truth. It's just my truth and my idea of truth, not yours. So, but I had met David's God, like I said, and David's God, and what I got out of the Psalms, Deacon Sivers, is that it was a God who loved. He loved. This was a God who could be loved and who did love in return. The way David would speak to him, "You're my hiding place. You're my love. You're my savior. You're my conqueror." And it was just such a personal way. Yeah. You know what?
Personal. Yeah.
That is so good. That just made me get choked up when you said that. It was like God saying to me, "Yes, Sue, that's what it was back then."
Well, I'm having a hard time letting go of how God used this for your wounds.
But wait till you hear this. Wait till you hear it. Well, anyway.
Okay, here we go.
He wanted me to get over this aversion to the church. And it started very simply. I went to this family party, and my niece, Jessica, she announced to everybody I want Aunt Susie to be my confirmation sponsor. Now, my brothers and all were there, being the uncivilized beasts that they are, and they started laughing. Ho, 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 yeah, the church will blow up when she walks in there. You don't want that. She hasn't been to confession for 15 years. She thought nobody's going to. So Jessie starts crying, right? I don't have Aunt Susie, and I don't want to go at all. I said, you know what? Wait a minute, guys. Wait a minute. I'm just going to, at the time I was a salesman, so I'll see what I can work out. I'll find the church. Find the church. Notice I said find the church. I had no idea where my church even was. I did not know where it was. So I go to this church, I find it, and I go in, and it's this big roly-poly Italian. I mean, I just love him. God rest his soul. He is now deceased. But I go into the church, and I explain to the church that I explained to the pastor there. I said, listen, I'd like to be somebody's confirmation sponsor. He says, well, are you in good standing with the church? And I'm like, well, yeah. I don't think anybody's mad at me or anything. I mean, yeah. Okay. And he's like, he knew right away. He's got a live wire in front of him, right? And he says, well, no, what I mean is, are you practicing the sacraments? And I said, well, which ones? And he says, Sue, if you want to be a sponsor, you have to be practicing the faith. And I said, you know what? You're right. That makes perfect sense. So let me make a deal with you. If you give me that certificate and let me do this, I promise you, I will return to church on Sundays. And the whole time I'm saying this, inside my head, I'm going, you fool. You can't tell him this. You're going to have to do it. You're going to have to do this now. And Sunday's your best day for writing. How are you going to do that? You get up in the morning and write. Don't do it. Don't do it. And he looks right at me and he goes, do you really mean that? I look at him. Yup, I mean it. I thought, oh my God, what have I just done? And he says, okay. He opens up the drawer, writes out the certificate. See you next Sunday. And I'm like, I don't believe I just did this. I don't believe I just did this. So I get the certificate, right? The next Sunday, I'm laying on the couch, getting ready to start my writing. I'm doing my nails, just relaxing. I get this nagging thought. You told that priest you were going to go to church on Sundays. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I don't even know what time the masses are. I didn't mean it. He took me serious. I was just kidding, right? I knew I wasn't kidding when I told him. I told him I was going to do it. And another hour goes by and I get another prod again. Hey, you said you're going to go to church. Oh my God, I don't believe I'm doing this. An hour later, I was sitting in the back pew of the church. Good old Catholic guilt. Sitting in the back pew, and I was just fussing with myself, and I was talking to David's God. In my head, I'm talking to David's God. What do you want with me anyway? This is how I was talking to him. What do you want with me? What is this all about? And just then, the choir starts singing a song. I never forgot this song. I love this song every time I hear it. It was Hosea. Long have I waited for you. You're coming home to me and living deeply in my new life. I got all choked up. And I thought to myself, wow, that sounds like something David's God would say.
Yeah. Well, even the invocation in the refrain, come back to me with all your heart. Don't let fear keep us apart. Right? Like,
yeah,
I have goosebumps right now imagining myself in your shoes.
I was so choked up and I thought it sounds just like David's God, but what is he doing here? What is he doing in a Catholic church? That's the disconnect that I had going on. That this David's God and the Catholic Church, like what was the Catholic Church? What was it in my mind at that time? Just a bunch of dinosaurs is what it was, because I had that whole feminist view of it. It was just a bunch of dinosaurs. So it was the first of many God incidences at Mass. I went to Mass every Sunday. And unless I was sick or something, major snowstorm or something happened, I have never missed Sunday Mass since.
Wow.
Now, remember, I hadn't even been back to confession yet here, but did that priest know what he was doing when he handed me that certificate? He knew. He smelled the Catholic guilt is what it was. He's like, you're going to get her because you know she's going to go now because of that Catholic guilt, right?
He's just reeling you in. He's reeling you in.
He reeled me in. He reeled me in. And then this one Sunday, I get to Mass and they talk about Ephesians 5. how
Oh,
wives
boy.
are supposed to be subjected to their husbands, and I was furious. I was driving out of that parking lot after railing at him. What is it with you anyway? Why do we always have to be subjected to somebody? I mean, you're so unfair with women, blah, blah, blah. And it led me to do the unthinkable. I read a church document. I sat down and read a church document. You know what one I read?
Letter to Women?
Mulieris Dignitatem. On the dignity and vocation of women. I never heard women described in such exalted terms in my whole life. Yeah. I mean, everything in that appealed to all this feminist sensibilities about the feminist genius, how God entrusts a human being to women in a special way, the complementary role of men and women, how men and women are human beings to an equal degree. Both are created in God's image because he has both the male and the female characteristics. Well, I remember thinking to myself, so that's why we're equal. We didn't know why we were equal when we were feminists. We were just equal. And if you didn't think so, you were a Neanderthal. Right. Of course we're equal. But this explained it to me. I understood that. And I thought, wow, all the discrimination and abuse we suffered, that was never meant to be. That was the loss of stability. And that fundamental equality of men and women. I was just so gripped by it, by how he treated women in his time. It was almost scandalous how he spoke with them. He healed them. He let them follow him. There was nothing in his behavior that reflected any kind of misogyny toward women. He always treated us. But then I got to that one part where, he catches the woman. He catches the woman in adultery, and he says to her, the commentary, John Paul in it, he says that's recorded in history. Similar situations, women are always left alone, exposed to the public with her sin, while behind her there lurks a man, a sinner guilty of the other's sin. And I remember reading that, and the tears just started flowing down my face. It was like deep down inside, it was like somebody was finally saying to me, Sue, I know what you did, but it wasn't all your fault. There was someone else there, and he was responsible too. And maybe he got away with it, but I saw it. And that just sealed it for me with him. That sealed it for me. That I remember writing in the margin, you tell him, Jesus. Meaning, and I still have that. I still have the original copy that I printed off at work. I printed off, it was 58 pages. And I remember my boss calling out to me, Sue, that printer's really going on and on out there. What do you got printing? Oh, nothing. It's not a big deal. Don't worry. It's almost done. I still have that original copy because I was so impressed by how Jesus is teaching about marriage. Yeah. That's what liberated women. Because prior to that, in the ancient times, women didn't own property. If a husband divorced his wife, she owned nothing. And if she did not have a male elder who could take her in, she was out in the street. She was totally out in the street. But then when Jesus said the man and the woman, neither could get divorced, he leveled that playing field. And really what he did was he protected women now from a major source of impoverishment for them during that time. And that was divorce and being thrown out in the street because they weren't educated. They owned no property. They became street people after that.
He actually freed them from being enslaved.
Yes. And all this, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was saying Mulieris Dignitatem. That was the first thing I read by John Paul II. And someone, because, I just like you, I grew up in the 70s too. And, they, all the velvet and the fluff and all that. But I didn't know the why of the faith. And I said, I'll read this. I know about women already. Right. And I was like, whoa.
Careful where you say that.
Yeah. I never read anything. Wow. So beautiful about women in my life. I was like, holy cow. I mean, it was just, things started to click. Things started to make sense. And then I just fell in love with John Paul II after reading Mulieris Dignitatem and just the insights. And here's a man who's celibate. And he writes so beautifully about women. It's just that, it was incredible. So
he had such a keen anointing, I think, on understanding the human person.
Yeah.
You know, both male and female, and just all of the dynamics at play, the interconnections. He just had this anointing, I think, to understand humanity in such a unique way in all of history. You know, who else understood it the way that he did in such a beautiful way?
Well said. Yeah. Well said. That's exactly what he had. He could see that, and I have to admit that that's when I started to love God. I moved him now from the like column into the love column. And I thought, yeah, you know, you're pretty cool. I mean,
you're cool.
You kind of got me, but he ain't seen nothing yet. Trust me. I was still very pro-choice or pro-abortion. I hate that word pro-choice. I was still very pro-abortion. You know, get your rosaries off my ovaries, the whole thing. You know, it's just a blob of cells, you know. This was KCV Planned Parenthood Southeastern PA. This was the one case that I remember being on television, and I would get so mad that I would actually crumble up my napkin at dinner and throw it at the television. You don't know what you're talking about. It's just a blob of cells. What's the matter with you people? And then I discovered the ultrasound. This is how the Lord did it with me. I would just be flipping through the channels, and I would see something on ultrasound. I thought I was just flipping through the channels, right? And I would say, wait a minute. That's a little baby has a beating heart and fingers and toes. That doesn't look like a blob of cells to me. And little stuff like that would happen to me. And then I discovered the coat hanger myth. You know, the one that the abortion industry uses to manipulate the public. Particularly, they manipulate women with that. That if we don't have safe legal abortion, women are going to die of back alley abortions. Well, according to the medical journals, women stopped dying from back alley abortions decades before Roe v. Wade with the discovery of penicillin. Now, they still do. There are still them happening out there, but not nearly the numbers that they're talking about. In 1941, they had recorded 1,400 of them. I think in like the 60s, it was down to like 120. But even more galling, and this is what really got me now, I learned that Planned Parenthood, one of the biggest purveyors of this coat hanger myth, knew all along that it was a bold-faced lie. In the July 1959 edition of the American Journal of Public Health, there was an article written by Dr. Mary Calderon, who was the medical director of Planned Parenthood, and she was going on and on and on about how safe abortion is now because, in the main, it's no longer dangerous because it's being done well by physicians. That was in 1959. So if it was so safe then when abortion was illegal, how come it's unsafe now if abortion should become illegal?
I'm so surprised that they would have lied.
Oh, yeah. Me too. What a lie. What really surprises me is that women fall for this stuff. And I saw that and I got mad. I got angry at them. I have a brain and I can do my own thinking, ma'am. Don't tell me how to think. And don't manipulate me with these lies. Give me the truth and let me make up my own mind. I was very shaken after that. Because, you know what? My whole foundation was crumbling beneath me. The whole thing with David's God and then the church, Mulieris Dignitatem, and then Planned Parenthood. And then I went and did something really clever. I read Humanae Vitae. I read Humanae Vitae. And I remember reading this one part where it says, you know, that we just condemn artificial means of regulating birth. Because the sexual act, what that does is if it's artificial means, it makes it into something just for self-gratification rather than for the purpose for which it was intended, which was to unite a man and woman in love and to create children. Now, here's somebody who wants to have a family, right? And I'm sitting there reading that and I'm thinking, now what could be wrong with that? Let me find something wrong with that because this is a Catholic who's writing this now. There's got to be something wrong here. But, you know, I had to admit that reserving relations for something romantic and meaningful, that appealed to me. And I thought, you know, this is what I really want. I really want this. So I turned against birth control. Oh. I just, you know, I'm stubborn, but I'm not stupid. And I was very stubborn. But once I learned the thing, it was like, okay, I don't want this anymore. Because I don't, especially when you read the prophecies of Pope Paul VI in there. About
it's extraordinary.
Yes. shocking.
The acuity of the detail and
Mm-hmm.
and how comprehensive it addresses like everything that we've been seeing. Like, it's just amazing.
It's all came true. And when I
Yeah.
saw that, I mean, I was just chilled to the bone when I saw that. I thought, this stuff is evil. Why am I doing this? I flushed him down the toilet. I actually flushed him down the toilet. I was just that was it. So the next time I got together with my boyfriend, I made the announcement. I'm not taking the pill anymore. And he looked like, I can't even describe the look on that guy's face. I'll never forget it. Like somebody who was walking along in the woods and having a wonderful time out in the, and then all of a sudden a tree fell on him. That's what he looked like. Like, what did she say? What did she just say? So we argued. We seemed to settle things. We had a very tense dinner and a movie. And then he left. I never saw him again.
Wow.
I never saw him again. He never called. And we had been dating for at least 9 months every weekend at that point.
Wow.
Never saw him again. Talk about feeling used.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? David's God had me by then. And I suddenly felt like smart. I thought, you know what, girl? You've gotten smart. You're actually intelligent now. And you're not letting these guys walk all over you. I was liberated. I was finally liberated. That's how I felt. I was finally liberated. So David's God, he had my attention at this point. And I decided I really loved him. And I knew that some of the stuff that I had been doing was wrong. And I decided I'm going to go to confession. And, I did it because I didn't want to hurt him. I just didn't want to hurt him. And
that's beautiful.
I still remember going, I wasn't too smart yet, I guess. I should have just gone in the nice dark box, right? But instead I call, can I talk to Monsignor? I would like to make a confession. So I went face to face with my friend, the roly-poly Italian. And I remember walking up to the rectory that night and my feet felt like blocks of ice. I was so scared. They were blocks of ice. So I'm in there and I'm yucking it up with him, And finally he says to me, I tell him, hey, Father, why don't I tell you what I didn't do? Otherwise, we're going to be here all night, He's like, Sue, he knew me. That Monsignor, he knew me like a book. Sue, tell me the worst of it, get it over with. Yeah, all right, okay. Mm-hmm. I says, boom. I just gave him the worst of it. And I expected him to keel over, right? Give me a lecture, give me a lecture, call the cops, I don't know. Anyway, he just looks at me. No change of expression. Okay, what else? Yep. In that moment, I knew the mercy of God.
Wow.
I knew the mercy of God. I thought, oh my Lord, you forgive that? You forgive all this? So after 15 years, I returned to communion the following day.
Glory to God.
I went to Mass, and it was just breathtaking. Between he and I will not repeat what happened in that first communion, but it was beautiful. And wow. I was very, very close to him, but my life still hadn't worked itself out because I found out right around that time that I was losing my job. I got laid off. And if that wasn't bad enough, my agent sent back the manuscript that I had recently sent to her that I thought for sure was the big one. And just with a letter that said, it's not even close to, start over. And I thought, oh my God.
Wow.
And I sat down on the floor of my study and I just felt suicidal. I did. Mm-hmm. That's how dark I felt. Like, what am I going to do? Wow. I don't have a life. I don't want to do this, be a salesman forever. My life is to write and I just can't get published. And I remember just kind of shaking my fist. The old drama queen came out. Hey, God, I know you're real. I know you're there. Why don't you help me get published? Because if you don't, just kill me. Because I don't want to live.
Stop messing with me. Stop toying with me and just do it already.
Yeah. Just come on now. So I was in the darkest depression I think I'd ever felt in my life. And after, I got up off the floor and I did what I always did at night. I picked up the Bible and I went to the concordance. And I would look up a word and whatever, grabbed me. And tonight was like despair, hopelessness, And I come across the name Philadelphia. And I'm thinking, what is Philadelphia doing in the Bible? And I opened it to Revelation 3, the letter to the Church of Philadelphia, in which the angel says, and I'm paraphrasing now, it's, I know you. You have a little strength, and at least you've never denied me. So I will open a door for you. And what door I open, no man will close. I got an anointing. And at the time, I did not know what anointings were. But I got an anointing. Like from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet, that actually frightened me. When I wrote about it, I called them nuclear goosebumps because they were just everywhere. And I got scared and I said, maybe I should just go do something normal like the dishes and forget all this religion stuff for a while. I mean, let's just get out of here. But I kept toying it in my head. Door? What door? What are you talking about, Lord? Could that be the door to Harper, Lord? I mean, was that you and talking to me? I mean, somehow I just knew that something happened to me that night. And I went from the grips of the darkest despair of my life to being completely convinced that I was about to be published. Just like that. Boom. Just flipped me on a dime. And that it was so surreal to me that I thought, are you cracking up, Sue? I think you might be cracking up. I mean, people don't act this way.
Right.
But I had this notion in my mind. It kept coming back to me. A manuscript I'd written 10 years earlier. Believe it or not, it was called Divine Origin, the book.
Oh, wow.
And I had this urge to rewrite it. And writing is like playing the piano. The more you do it, the better you get. So I had written it 10 years earlier, and I looked at the book and I thought, I could do a lot better job on this book. I'm gonna rewrite it. See how he gets me to do exactly what and I have no clue what he's doing with me. So I went ahead and I started rewriting this book. And the writing went so well. It was so smooth. I would read it over sometimes and I couldn't even remember. It was so beautiful. And I used to joke with my friends. I said, hey, you know what? I think a dead writer's writing through me, And then I sent that to my agent on Easter Monday. It was 1991, Senator. Never forget this. I will not forget this for the rest of my life. Into eternity, I remember this. Within a few weeks, my agent writes me back and she says, Sue, you finally got it. I know exactly what publishing house to send this to. July 23rd, 1991, I come home from work, hit the button on my answering machine, and I heard the words that I had waited all my life to hear. Sue, call me right away. HarperCollins just made you an offer. It was my first book. I was published. My first book, and it was Harper, of all people.
Of everybody, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I knew he did it. I knew it. There was no question in my mind. In fact, I grabbed my purse and I went straight to the church. I didn't even call anybody. I went straight to the church and I just sat there staring at the tabernacle, crying. And the tears that I was crying, it was gratitude. It was gratitude. That was the biggest dream of my life. And he made that come true. What does that say about God?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what it said to me. It was like, yeah, I'm with you. Whatever you want, you got it. And after that, I called my agent and said, yep, send me the contract. I'll sign it. I go to my parents' house, and I sit down with my mom. She was just sweet. God rest her soul. Very petite, soft-spoken, very ladylike, And I tell her the whole story about God and the book and all that. And when I get done, she looks at me and she says, Susie, don't ever tell this to anyone else. I'm like, oh no, but Mom, it's true. It's true. It really happened. She's like, I don't think you should talk about this with your brothers and sisters. No, I want to tell them. Just in case I didn't get the message, though, after the first contract I got, the book wasn't even out yet. The Lord put it on my heart to redo another book. And I did. I redid that book. And on the following year, on the exact same day, July 23rd, I hit the button on my answering machine, and there's a message from my agent, Sue. Harper just made you an offer on your second book. This is unprecedented. Your first book isn't even out yet. And they bought your second one. It's a miracle. And I remember saying, yeah, Jerry, it was. That's exactly what it was.
You're thinking, that's my God. That's the God I believe in.
That is him. And, that night I sit down to get my Bible. I am just like on a cloud. I'm just out there. Like, not just that my books are published, but there really is a God and he loves me. It's like, whoa, and what do I read from the Bible, the Song of Solomon? Arise, my love, my fair one, and come away with me, for the winter's past, the rain is over, the flowers appear on the earth, and the time of singing has come.
Wow.
And I remember just thinking to myself, you know what? I'm yours. I am yours. And I've never looked back. I did go on to become a nonfiction writer. I worked with the Catholic Standard and Times for many years. My editor was Michelle Johnson she's the director of communications at EWTN now. The two of us worked together for many years at the Catholic Standard and Times, and I went to work for Johnette Williams at Women of Grace as a staff writer for her. So I've been a writer ever since. I mean, he made my dreams come true. He made them come true.
I'm so moved by your story. I'm sure all of us are. There was something that really stood out to me, that it started with the notion that every step of the way that you were describing, I was like, I think she's telling my story. Like literally, I was a cradle Catholic. I ended up stumbling into the New Age movement. I was getting into all kinds of shenanigans I shouldn't have, and got to the point of being suicidal. And like, it was John Paul II's theology of the body that brought me home to the church ultimately. And the journey of healing, and there being that massive confession. I'm sure, Ellen, you have a similar confession. And I was just thinking, like, wow, how crazy that it's so similar. And I was like, well, this is probably, I bet there's a lot of people that have been through the New Age movement and come to the Catholic Church as a result of the theology of the body. And as I thought more about that, I was trying to figure out, why is this idea in my head? And I was then brought to this thought about, so I used to run the Office of Marriage and Family Life for the Diocese of Toledo in Ohio. And I would go around the diocese and I would give these presentations to the priests and in the different regions. And I would let them, do a Q&A with me about the office and whatever. And there was this one time that I was in a rural community, a lot of farming and stuff. And there were probably 5 or 6 priests in the room. And I just asked them, like, from the standpoint of the diocese, what's the biggest thing that my office can help you with marriage and family life? And unanimously, they said the opioid crisis.
Wow.
And I was like, what? In the middle of rural Ohio, in the Diocese of Toledo, the number one problem in your parish is the opioid crisis? And I asked them, because I was confounded. And they said, you have no idea how many of our parishioners, they have family members in their household who are overdosing, who are addicted, who are ruining their lives. And the connection to what we're talking about is that, at least for me, I don't want to speak for you, Sue, when I went into the New Age movement, I was actively pursuing meaning and purpose and the idea of mattering. And the New Age movement proposes that you are a God. And that was very appealing. And I think a big part of this opioid crisis, people are giving up on themselves, giving up on their lives because they don't feel purpose, they don't feel meaning. And that's part of what makes New Age so attractive, at least it was for me. And in Theology of the Body, Pope St. John Paul II, he tells us about our true worth, our true meaning, our true dignity, the lowercase g gods that Christ calls us to be in the New Testament, sourcing from his divinity, his power, and the authentic expression of all that is good, true, and beautiful about how amazing we are as human beings. Thomas Merton's standing on the street corner, seeing how everyone was shining like the sun and wishing he could just tell them that. And I just think about how, like, that was for me a big part of why it was so healing. Do you resonate with that at all?
Absolutely. You just took the words right out of my mouth. Really, that's what I was looking for.
That was rude.
Yeah, no, really. I mean, exactly where I was coming from. I needed meaning. I needed worth. I felt. I used to tell people, like, after that divorce, that I felt like I was a lunch bag, and somebody ate the lunch out of it and crumbled it up and threw it in the gutter. And that's me. I was the lunch bag laying in the gutter. They were done with it now. We're done. We ate everything that we wanted, and now get out of here. That's what I felt like. And when I was looking for something, I wanted hope. I wanted hope.
Yeah.
Tell
And
me
you
that I'm
wanted
going to be
love.
okay. Yeah, I wanted that. I was, I married my high school sweetheart. He was my soulmate. I mean, it was a devastating loss to me, but I wanted hope and I wanted meaning in my life. And that was my writing, but the writing wasn't happening. Right. And it was like, what am I here for? And, hey, God, if you can't let this happen, then kill me. That's where I was at. And the New Age filled a lot of those voids for me. The psychic told me what I wanted to hear. The astrology gave me all kinds of hope and told me, yeah, as soon as that planet moves over there, things are going to look better now. This is just how, and once these stars line up, you're going to have what you want.
And once Mars isn't in retrograde, everything's going to be fine.
That old retrograde Mars, he's such a pain in the neck, isn't he? Yeah. But but you know what? When you're in that state and you're wounded, and look how many people are walking around out there that are wounded, that appeals to you. That pulls you in. They know how to get you to be interested in the New Age.
Yeah.
It's talking their language.
Yeah, and I love that the way God pulled you in was in the crevice, but with the Psalms. That He gave you, King David's God. And I think it's hilarious that you didn't know what does it have to do with Catholicism. I mean, to me, that was one of the funniest things you said in the whole entire story.
Yeah, that was great.
I was like, oh, that's classic. So yeah. Well, we really appreciate you sharing your testimony with us. We look forward to our next episode that we're going to record, where we're going to dig deep into the New Age movement and all the different issues with it, et cetera, et cetera. But how can people get in touch with you, Sue, if they want more information? Do you do speaking engagements? Do you do what? Please share with our audience.
Yes, I do all kinds of public speaking. I do radio, written many, many books. The best way to get a hold of me is at my email address, which is sbrinkmann, and that has 2 N's on the end, at womenofgrace.com. That's the best way to get a hold of me, and whatever it is you need. And especially if you have any questions about the New Age or anything like that, you can reach me at newage@womenofgrace.com, and they come directly to me, and I will answer all those questions for you. I'll answer them personally.
New Age with 1 N.
New Age with 1 N. New Age with 1 N. But Brinkman's got 2 N's, and if you leave that second N off, I will not get that email. So it's Brinkmann.
Brinkmann.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
At womenofgrace.com, and you will get hold of me right away.
All righty. Well, stay tuned. And if you are watching this one next week, there'll be part 2. But if you really like what you're hearing and you want to know more about the Awaken Catholic Apostolate, and more information about the Prodigal Life, please go to the awakenapp.io. That's where you can get all the podcasts that we have, a daily gospel reflection, a daily saint of the day. There's a prayer library in English, Spanish, and Latin. There's a rosary in English, Spanish, and Latin that's beautiful. And there's music, and you can create a music line. And also there's a messaging app. So if you like it, go to the awakenapp.io. And now Deacon Harold is going to tell us how you can support us, because we need support. Thank you.
Just go to theprodigalife.com, and on there you will see different levels of giving and support that you can do to the Prodigal Life. And we have tied those different giving levels to the hierarchy of angels. So you can be an angelic investor in the Prodigal Life and receive eternal rewards.
Amen.
That sounds good.
All righty. Thank you very much. And thank you again, Sue. God bless you.
Thank you.